How is everybody? Are we in a good spot? You have a glass of wine if you care to partake, and everybody's awake after lunch. I promise that I'll definitely keep the energy level high. Beyond that, you're on your own. So, branding, what I really like about this series of presentations is we get more granular, we get more practical. I really like the idea this morning of us talking about the foundation of your business. And I appreciate you playing along with me because, again, some people are probably further along than others in that. But I think everybody owes it to themselves to reevaluate it every so often, to re-energize their teams internally by making sure they know how important those things are. And again, it's a good reminder when you start going into some of these marketing opportunities of the filters that you have to use on which ones you choose. Branding is more granular. We're going to talk about the actual application of those stories. We're going to talk about all of the media that's available to you, all of the media that you yourselves control and that you can make a difference in when marketing your brand. So we'll start by saying that this is a highly educated, discerning wine drinker who is never going to visit your Facebook page. Where this man travels all over the place, but he'll never set foot in your tasting room. These are realities that we face. And you have 100 plus bottles on the shelf. Is yours going to stand out or is it going to blend in? These are the questions that we're going to answer during this presentation today. We're definitely going to leave room at the end for questions because this is going to be so tactical. People are going to say, well, should I spend time in Facebook? How much effort do I have to put into my website? And I think we should talk about that as a family of winemakers, mead makers, and cider makers, not as competitors, more as friends. So you got this before. I worked here, and I also had a stint as that guy. A year and a half, I was an assistant brewmaster at BJ's. We opened up a Temple brewery, and honestly, the reason I did it is because I felt like I was only marketing half of the product. Academically, I could market beer all day, but until you brew it, you really don't know. The same's true with wine, right? It's tough to own the story unless you've been there. So, in brewing, I was able to at least be a little more credible when I made my next jump to Sierra Nevada and ran the marketing for them. The opportunity for Market Your Craft is, again, during this presentation and perhaps in subsequent conversations afterwards, we want you to have the tools you need as do-it-yourselfers to drive traffic to your tasting room, to broaden your engagement with your current and more so your new customers and capture those new sales. All of this information, along with the video, is going to be up probably in the next couple days after the presentation at Market Your Craft, Indy Wine, and that should be on your sheet as well. You do have a worksheet that Katie handed out this morning. If you don't have that, we're happy to get you another copy. The opportunity, again, is to take notes where it makes sense for you. If you have a specific marketing vehicle like web that you're interested in, jot some notes, jot some questions. Take this back as a tool that you can use immediately to start making an impact on your marketing. So here's how we're going to lay it out for this afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about strategy, which from a marketing perspective is going to be the follow-up to this morning's business conversation. It's the strategy and plan that you'll put in place. And then it's the media that you're going to use to tell that story. We're going to go through all of them. We like to call it the local X factor, and I think you folks would understand this better than even I do, and that is community. What does community mean to selling your wine? What does community mean to the relationships that you have with the locals? How can you expand that? How can you give people who don't live in the area the same feeling when they're researching whether or not to visit you and they finally step foot in the door? And then a content calendar. Call it what you will, we just want you to be consistent. And when you put a calendar in place, like a budget, you tend to execute against it, because when it's there, when it's planned out for you, you'll build content, you'll make posts on social, you'll update your website, send out a press release around a new varietal or a new vintage. Plus, I have plenty of examples, most of which you'll be familiar with. So no one knows the brand better than you do. It's just a fact. You're never going to get someone as in touch with the brand as the owner, the winemaker, the immediate team that sells it every single day. But you can get people close. And that's the point of the whole conversation. The more you expose of yourself and your brand, the more you tell people, the more you invite them to experience it with you, to take co-ownership with you. And we're going to talk about opportunities too, to even have tasting panels perhaps, where you invite your best customers, the ones at the bar, the wine club members, you invite them to taste with you, to be a part of the process. The more involved they are, the more they love you, and the more differentiated you are, because the next door neighbor is not doing it. So, even though nobody knows it better than you, the customers expect to. They expect to have as much information about your brand as possible. Again, the internet allows us perfect information, right? If we're researching, going back to this morning, we need to be transparent. We need to be very consistent and deliberate in our marketing. This is an opportunity for us. Not talking about a lot of extra work, just talking about being strategic about how and what you do. We start with a company position. Now, I've heard this called a bunch of different things. Big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG. It's an awful acronym, but the point is that set it out there. Set it out there for yourself. It's kind of the marketing side of the vision that we talked about this morning. You've got a vision that you've given to your team. It's how and when you want to operate. It's where you want to be. It's the growth you want to have. If you don't tell yourself that, if you don't tell your team that, you're not headed in any direction. Now, I really like to look at these as internal, because customers are never going to see this. It's just meant to be part of your planning process, having a goal in mind, and then setting a time frame after which you evaluate yourself and your marketing against that goal. So I'm guessing that a lot of you could see your goals in this. It's probably barrelage related. We have a certain growth goal in mind. We've planned for this. We talk about expansion. We prioritize these things. We buy equipment. It's usually product related. I'm going to ask you to think a little bit differently as well. How can it be seats, people sitting at your tasting room? How can it be traffic volume? Maybe positioning of your product to be a little more premium. Now, this is a very important piece of marketing. Again, it's internal, and we call it the brand positioning statement. It's basically a combination of what we talked about with the pain points that your customer might experience. It's the brand that you want to put in front of them and how that brand solves that problem. So you could literally, on your sheet of paper, you could write in to the customer who's fed up with going to retail and not having any varieties that are Indiana grown. I'm looking to provide them with a local alternative to that retail experience where they can not only get Indiana grown wine, but they can have the best customer experience possible. whatever that is. I just made that up. But you start to see your own brand positioning statement in that and how that could affect the marketing that you do and where you do it. The content is obviously important, and everybody focuses on content nowadays, especially with social. This is a long list, but it's not exhaustive. All we want you to say is, I want people to be X once they experience what I have to give them. I want them to feel challenged. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel edgy. I want them to feel like they're in the know. Whatever you want them to feel, whatever content you're going to put out there has to answer that question. It has to get them there. It has to put them in a spot where they themselves feel edgy. They feel like you get it. They feel like you're a first mover. Pick a couple adjectives and really own those adjectives in the marketing that you do. All of this is going to fit together. Thanks for playing along. Profile your customer. This is very important, and it's oftentimes overlooked because we know that person who's sitting at the end of the bar. We know that that's George. We know that that's Janet. And Janet always comes in on Thursdays, and George comes in after work on Tuesdays. And that's fine. That's a place to start. But it's the current customer that we talked about this morning. It's not the bigger ocean of new customers that need to be there when our current customers stop coming. So the more you know about customers now, the more you could find customers like them. And this is a lot of words that you don't need to read. But the point is that if I can describe in this level of detail the customer that I'm going after, their age, where they live, their education level, what they aspire to do, are they married, what are their hobbies? Imagine that level of detail when you're deciding what marketing vehicles to use. Because you say, would Brandon and his wife look at this Facebook post? Would Brandon care to see my mobile site? Would he get the information that he needed to visit my winery? You talk to Brandon specifically. It sounds cheesy, but it absolutely works. These are called personas, and basically if you have a question of whether or not your marketing is going to stick, you ask Brandon. Now I get a little detailed. You can get as detailed as you want, but the more detailed, the better in cases like this. Now, we call them creators or curators. You don't always have to create original content. You can reuse content that's working out there, and that's sometimes just as powerful because you align your brand with something that's relevant, whether it's a lifestyle, it's a community effort, it's the outdoors, whatever lines up with your brand. If there's content out there that makes sense, repost it on social. You all of a sudden introduce yourself to a group of people with similar interests and likes. That is a whole new group of people who could be tasting room visitors. So it doesn't have to be owned. It doesn't have to be created. It could be curated, but somebody has to do it. And a lot of times this is tough because everybody wears a bunch of different hats at smaller and family-owned wineries. I get it. But just designate somebody. Somebody whose job it is, or at least part-time job, or 2 days a week, or whatever the case may be. Designate somebody to start thinking like this. What can I capture in the winery? What can I capture in the winemaking process? What would Brandon, who we saw before, what would he and his wife like to see on my website? What kind of content would generate interest? Let somebody own that. Then you get that consistency. And you're also going to have the person who can routinely take those photos for you. You check the box on that. And then tracking. So nobody really likes reporting, but this is very important. How are you going to track the success of this effort? It could be as raw as sales, profitability, traffic to your tasting room. For some of the other media, it could be content downloads, views, likes, followers. It could be the engagement that you have on the website, participation in a contest. Just start thinking about whatever I put out there, I want to be able to track whether it was successful. So performance tracking is important. Okay, now that we've got the business side of this done, let's talk about the fun and media. Now, media is what lets you put your brand story that we talked about this morning in front of your customers. And it might seem very fundamental, but there are a lot of different media options in front of us, and most of us aren't using all of them, but all of us could. So our opportunity today is to really walk through at a very high level most of the media that we all have access to and how to best take advantage of them with best practices. And it's just a reminder that no two wineries, meaderies, cideries will talk the same, will use the same media. Doesn't mean you have to use all of them. Just means you have to evaluate whether or not they would make sense for you. Packaging. Packaging is so important, not only on-site, but especially with distribution at retail. You see those shelf sets that are just crazy to me nowadays, hundreds of wines. How do people choose? And we know how people choose. You either are a current customer or you're a wannabe wine enthusiast who goes through labels and tries to read a little bit about the back, but in the end we all respond very quickly to the visual look of a label. It's very important. The packaging is so important. And what I saw in Nielsen was that they, after many studies, said that 29% of the consumers that walk into retail know what they want to buy when they walk in. So that means you've got better than 70% of the people who are going to be responding to your shelf presence. I don't need to tell you that. I have a couple good examples that the team found. So Monkey Hollow, great labels. There are a lot of ways that I could, as a somewhat creative and partially artistic guy, I could pick this apart, but I don't need to. There are aspects of it that jump. What I'm looking for is something that's just visually interesting, not obnoxious, like we saw in the last slide, something that's visually interesting to me. What is going to stand out from the rest of the similar varietals on the shelf? Wherever your placement is, premium or economy, how am I going to say my story in such a way that at least gets their attention? And this did so for us. Not only is the icon and the logo work visually interesting and makes you curious, but the presentation of it and the special line below, not the biggest cartoon fan, but it works for me. The good colors, it's a little raw. It's, the ripped edges almost, the look. I don't know, it speaks to a very approachable brand that doesn't take themselves too seriously, that really wants to try and just be who they are, not be someone that they're not. Okay, so you're tracking with me on this. There are reasons to like a label like this. Barley. Now, they have an entire line that I really like, but they also vary it up. So these are never going to exist in retail environment altogether, but boy, do they look beautiful. There's kind of a rainbow right there in the picture. Opportunities to build in not only photography but illustration. Then you've got character choice, typeface, color palette, all of these things, they jump off the shelves in a way that the traditional wine label might not. And then Malorun. So this is the artist series. And from what I understand, because Malorun also does an extremely good job at PR, I believe, in this regard, they invite local artists to contribute label ideas. And that happens, I believe, annually, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. The opportunity is also to give back to the arts community with them. Now, not only do you get a locally sourced, creative element in your packaging, you've got a PR opportunity because you're contributing back to the Arts Council, and it's just a feel-good story that has a lot of legs that you can talk about in any of your media. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that everybody go out and do a contest for their labels. That's not the point. The point is the storytelling opportunity that that one label provided for them. Digital is a necessity. We talked a little bit about it this morning, and how important for someone who's never experienced you firsthand in your tasting room to be able to research you. So we know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it is scary to think that 50% of the internet traffic today happens on a mobile. And I'm here to tell you that not all of your sites are mobile friendly. We looked at all of them. And there's an opportunity there. I know that you understand how this works. From a technical perspective, we don't need to go into the details, but mobile-friendly websites are possible. They are easy to do. All you need to do is prioritize it. You need to understand, too, that if I'm looking at your brand on a mobile phone, I don't want to read a novel. And a lot of us put our life story on our website, and I completely get it. It's an interesting story, don't get me wrong. However, if I'm looking at it on a little screen, I'm not going to scroll more than one swipe's worth to get the meat of the content that I need. So not only is it imperative that you have a mobile-friendly site, look at the mobile-friendly site yourself as a customer and ask yourself if you would buy your own wine. Not a threat, just a suggestion. Now, social is a hot topic, and I fully expect there to be hand raisers like, I don't agree with that, or tell me more, tell me more. All I'm suggesting for social is that you need to think strategically about it. People sign up for an account and they post everything from relevant winery works, events that you have, to something that just seemed funny at the time, and it was a meme that I thought might be relevant. And there's a lot of junk in social. It's not a dumping ground for your every single thought. Think about social strategically. The rub for me is that so many brands have social, but they're not leveraging to their core strengths. And so we really like to look at Facebook as long-form stuff. And I've talked to you folks, Facebook's having its share of issues. We know that. Privacy concerns, people are leaving in staggering numbers. Even though Facebook owns Instagram, which we already know, Instagram seems to be where everybody's headed. Do you have an Instagram strategy versus a Facebook strategy? How much time do you devote to this? All very good questions. Social is important. It's not the answer to all of your marketing questions. And what we saw in the first slide was an intelligent, discerning female drinker who never visits Facebook. If all you're doing is posting to Facebook, you are missing a huge opportunity, not only with her, but with people like her. So you have to understand that you can't put all your eggs in one basket in this case. You really have to understand the media that your new customer is looking for, and you need to satisfy that. Like we were talking about with packaging this morning, maybe single-serve cans are the future. Instagram business profiles, this is a necessity to get a business profile. More than half of you don't have business profiles. It's easy. It's a switch in your settings. That allows you the phone, email, location, contact information, which was missing from Instagram before. It also gives you much better analytics on the back end if you care to geek out on that stuff. So very important. Again, the difference between Facebook and Instagram, aside from Instagram is killing it right now, Instagram gives you that visual branding that you're looking for. It's people enjoying the tasting room at Sugar Creek. It's people who really enjoyed a festival or a music event that just happened at Blackhawk, for example, with Jennifer. These are all very important things to have on Instagram. Twitter, I like Twitter. Twitter and Country Heritage actually is a great example of this. Timely, topical stuff. I believe that you're going to want to put up, here's who's coming to the winery tonight. Here's the food truck that's going to be there tomorrow. We've got an event that's happening. It's almost sold out. It's timely, short bits of information. It's not long form by any means, and it's less visual than Instagram. It's kind of that sweet spot right between Facebook and Instagram. But you need to do it. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, those are the ones we focus on because it's where your customers are right now. There are others, and who knows how long those will be around. But Country Heritage, again, we like them for Twitter. It's very timely, relevant stuff. We also have just a consistency. It's like a routine for them when they have something to post, and we love that. It's consistent because the time that you stop talking to your customers, they're not going to stop listening. They're going to start listening to somebody else. It's a fact. The customers who engage your brand in these vehicles, they're hungry for information, and they're going to find it elsewhere if you're not providing it. Not saying you have to post every hour, every day, but the posting that you do should be reflective of your brand story that we talked about this morning, and that consistency of engagement needs to be there. French Lick, beautiful imagery. Behind the scenes, we like behind the scenes transparency like we talked about. There's a rawness to it, but the photos are very well done, and really it exposes the personality of the brand in Instagram, which again is that visual medium. Patoka Lake, really like this one. They leveraged this for a little bit more information about yoga. Again, they're consistent. They post fairly regularly. They like to post with visuals. All these things are important. Also, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that they're taking advantage of the immediate customer service aspect of Facebook, which not everybody is doing. It's just another means of showing the customer, hey, I want to try and connect with you in any way I can. Send us a note. We'll respond really quickly. They could do that by email, but Facebook is not an email medium. Facebook is an immediate medium. And so having this kind of free feature enabled on your Facebook page, if Facebook makes sense in your strategy, is just a gimme. And it also sets you apart because not everybody in Indiana does that. Tell you a story quickly. Carpenter Creek, we like this. Very visual on the front end. And We all know that having a video load up on the home page sometimes weighs the home page down, but if you do it correctly, man, boy, you get to that emotional spot really fast. And that's what you're looking for, because half the people are going to leave after they hit your home page anyways. It's just a fact. What do you communicate with your home page? How quickly can you do it? Tippy Creek. I got to give credit to them because they actually have an age gate. And you can argue for or against an age gate. We like the age gate because it's not federally regulated yet. It's a best practice. But to the extent we can self-regulate, then we're going to keep them out of our business. We don't want the government coming in and dictating how we talk to our customers. And to the extent that we can take very easy steps like this, even though it puts exactly 3 clicks in between the customer and the home page, this is an easy win. There were 2 wineries in Indiana that did this out of the 80 we studied. Think about that one. We liked Oliver for the mobile. It's very friendly. It's responsive. It has the right amount of content. It's got the e-commerce capabilities, beautiful visuals. Again, they've spent considerable amount of time and effort in highlighting their brand using digital. Search ranking, I'm not going to talk about this one for a long time, but just know how you show up in Google. There are tools that make it very easy for you to start owning keywords. If you want to be known for your area, you want to be known for a particular varietal, there are tricks that are free that make you show up on the first page of Google. How many of you, unless you're typing your winery, meadery, cidery's name explicitly in quotes, show up on the first page of Google? What if you did? What would that mean for traffic? Start to ask yourself some of these questions. It's the low-hanging fruit. It just takes time. Not a ton of time, just an effort. And then print is not dead. There's an opportunity to use print strategically. You know, it's not as efficient as some of the digital media that we've been talking about, but boy, it still communicates a brand. It can be very visual. It can work to your advantage. It can help you with relationships with the community. We like advertorials where they talk in kind of an editorial tone about your brand. Radio spots, if it makes sense, maybe for bigger ticket events, but TV is often price prohibitive. News, public relations is really important. If you haven't ever sent out a press release on behalf of your brand, we would encourage you to do so. All it takes is putting together a quick template, basically, and there are thousands of templates online that you can copy off of. The opportunity is enhancements to your winery or your production facility, growth of your business, adding retail, adding distributors, adding varietals. These are talking points that all qualify for press release. And if you send a press release to a targeted number of media in your area or beyond in your region, you will get news pickup. And the more news pickup you get from the local beat guy or gal who's trying to fill a story for this Saturday's edition, all of a sudden they're filling that space with you, which brings all of their customer base that's looking at that editorial, that newspaper, that online zine, all of those people now have eyes on you that didn't before. It takes just a couple minutes to form those relationships, write those press releases. The source of new customers is there. And then local retail. Your folks at the wineries and production facilities know this. Salespeople, for each of you, sales promotions really strengthen that relationship with the retailer. And we talked about the store owner this morning. The relationship with the retailer is key when you've got distribution there. And to the extent that you can help feed that, makes it even stronger. Give them the information they need to look very educated and very articulate about your brand. How are they going to be your ambassador at the shelf? It's just like a bartender or a beer tender. If you've got somebody who walks in with kind of a dazed look in their eyes and they say, hey, welcome to X, would you like us to make a recommendation, or what do you like to drink? What if that retailer was only talking about you? So sales promotion is not only the gifts and samples, it's the education and what you provide in terms of a relationship with these folks. Doesn't take much. And then lastly, in this area, events and sponsorships, which we're going to talk about in the panel as well. It's so rich with opportunity to get the product into people's hands. This is a local community event. It's something maybe even at a bigger stage. It's competitions, award ceremonies, opportunities for people to try your brand that they didn't have before. Places I've worked in the past, they've had entire teams doing tours for product sampling and such. So there is an opportunity to expand your business very strategically through the use of high visibility stages like this. And one that we picked up on that we really liked was the Uplands Wine Trail event. Now, this is a great opportunity for similar AVA folks to co-sponsor an event. Timely, topical. They obviously put money against the advertising for it. So this is one of those events that probably will get them a bunch of new customers, because they're basically sharing current customers from each of the wineries and they're introducing new ones. So we like to think of the X factor, again, that opportunity for community, and it goes beyond terroir. They would often say that they respect the geography. They've got a wine grape that's well suited for this climate, the soil conditions for this. Again, most of you have that very same story. And so we would ask you how you go one step further to really get the customers who are looking at your digital, your social, any of your print, any of your touch points, get them to see themselves sitting right there having a shareable moment at your tasting room. When you look at it from that customer perspective, you start to see the stories that you're telling maybe a little differently and how you need to stand out. We really like the sense of place. Now, sense of place from a terroir perspective makes sense to everybody. Maybe something that would be a new sense of place perspective is how I can see a brand for its place in the community, how I can view or witness what they're doing in the community, and how that lines up again with my value set. Something that we really liked was the Running Vines winery. And they put this on the website. Very straightforward. I won't read it all, but it's family, community, passion. They want people to see themselves visiting a winery that has those same values that they do, that are passionate about the very same community that they are. Now, I think it's a bold statement to actually put that up on the winery, and there will be new customers who visit because of this page. So a sense of place doesn't always have to do with the geography. It's a feeling that you can evoke with your customer. We talked a little bit about giving them an invitation and how important this is. It's inviting them behind the scenes. So just like we talked about with Huber this morning, this was a neat opportunity to see the generation story with black and white photos and the whole bit. Let's go one step further. We're not perfect. We sometimes have to dump wine. Sometimes we make a mistake in the process. I'm not saying expose your faults. I'm just saying expose who you are as a brand and how you got there. People want to see the real you. They don't want to see the polished, advertised you. Plenty of people could spend millions of dollars making themselves look better. I want you to be real to these folks, which means inviting them to see behind the scenes. Start thinking about your website not in terms of the boilerplate About Us page that we have to have up there because everybody else does. Think about photos that you could share of installing a new piece of equipment. You might not think anything of it, but to somebody who's interested in wine and not necessarily familiar, you just got them more interested. Because the more they know, the more they can be a knowledgeable source for their friends, which is what everybody's looking to do. They're looking to discover brands and be the ones to share it with their friends. So invite them in, invite them behind the scenes. That gives them a feeling of community. Customer focused, it sometimes gets overused, but being customer focused is mandatory nowadays. You have to put the customer first. As much pride as we have in our work and the wines and meads and ciders that we produce, we're nothing without our customers. That is a basic business fact. And they know that. That's the rub. Because before, we could get away with putting out a product and, not really caring whether or not the customer liked it because I know I would sell it. Well, they hold the keys now because they have that perfect information, because they research everything before they invest themselves or any of their relationships with their friends. We have to be customer focused. And to us, at Market Your Craft, we like customer service. We talked a little bit about Zappos this morning, but what are your expectations for customer service? How do you conduct a transaction? How do you service after a transaction? We're not talking about a dishwasher, we're talking about a bottle of wine. But they want to have a relationship with you. They're going to invest in you. How do you service their needs? And again, we liked Tippy Creek on this one because it seemed like at every digital touch point, they were asking if they could help. It's on the social channels. It's on their website with this app in the very bottom, which is, again, a plug-in for WordPress. You probably can't tell right off the bat, but our guess is that this is a WordPress site on the back end, which is free to do, and this app is a plug-in that connects directly to their Facebook account, and you type something in, it tells somebody on their phone that there's an inquiry, and if it's during business hours, they'll answer it from their phone. You can't get any more immediate than that. But this level of customer service is new for websites. Websites have been relatively static in that way. Sure, you have a contact us form, but that could be 48, 72 hours. Facebook is immediate. So are these types of messengers. So we like Tippy Creek for their effort to make customer service a priority. Finishing up, the content that you're creating or you're curating, it's not only reflective of your brand story. You don't want to put anything out there that's going to be damaging, but it needs to be consistent. And we like regular content. From a social perspective, we really evaluate storytelling based on 2 posts a week per medium. So if you have a Facebook account, if you have an Instagram account, if you have a Twitter account, if you have something to say twice a week is basically engaging for people. Now, with a website, it might be less frequent, but weekly, monthly, events that you're doing, these are easy wins to keep your digital content very up to date. You've got amazing products that are being released. You have events, you have relationships, partnerships, you've got new retail. All of these things can be talked about, and it's an opportunity for you to create a calendar. Now, this can take whatever form you want, but the team found this template in Word, of all places. All we did was populate it with a bunch of relevant, pulsed content, which you're already doing. It's your regular Tuesday trivia night. It's holidays, special events. It's wine, spirits, and beer holidays, right? So you don't need to work very hard to fill an entire calendar with content. And then if you look strategically at where do I put this, I'm not going to put everything on every account. I'm going to put them where it's relevant. Facebook, again, with a little bit of a longer form. Instagram with that beautiful visual. Twitter with that timeliness. You will necessarily see, if this is a criteria for success for you, you will necessarily see your social engagement and followers increase exponentially as soon as you start going about it in a consistent way. After a month, you'll definitely notice a difference because all of a sudden you're engaging your current base in such a way that they're sharing with their friends, and this is how you grow your base. So, however you do your calendars, the idea and the opportunity is to at least be consistent about it and to lean into it like you lean into a marketing budget. I have the money to spend, I need to spend it. I have the calendar in front of me, I'm going to take the opportunity to continue to post content regularly. And so what we discussed was the strategy, which was the marketing side of the business fundamentals we talked about this morning. We did a high-level review with hopefully some relevant local examples of the media that you can use. We talked a bit about the X factor, which we like to imagine is the certain community dynamic that adds to your brand. And then we talked about being consistent with the content calendar. And like this morning, we'll thank our friends at these wineries, meaderies, and cideries because they unknowingly provided some content for our presentation. But again, the point is that these folks are to be celebrated because they've figured out different aspects of being best practice examples with the marketing that we were talking about. So we talked about writing a story this morning. We defined the content that was worth sharing this afternoon. And again, just take some time to focus on marketing and to treat it like the asset that it is, which means every so often spend some time thinking about the business side of marketing, your competitors, where you fit in the industry, where you are with respect to your budget, and how to make your marketing dollars work harder for you. So with that, I think we do have some time for questions. And I fully expected some pretty tactical ones. So hit me or challenge me. Questions? Oh, yeah.
I feel like there are so many legal restrictions as to how we can do promotions as far as discounts and coupons and
Sure.
ladies' night, 2 for 1. There's so many things that are technically illegal for us to do. Do you know of a comprehensive list of things that would apply to Indiana that we know do jump through all those hoops?
Well, it's a good question. And actually, when we were researching for the presentation today, we found a website that went through all of the current legal restrictions. So I'm happy to send that to you, and I'll post it up on the website as well. I don't have that on this laptop, but it was fairly comprehensive, and as you know, it's changing. It seems like it was even 2 weeks ago, the digital restrictions for California for promoting events at an on-premise establishment were lifted. So now you can post a social post on behalf of a retailer, which was completely new because, again, you couldn't show favoritism before. So it's changing. You're probably going to see it on the left or right coasts before you see it here in the heartland, but it's ahead. It's right ahead. I'll send that link out. Thank you for asking. That was a good question. I won't claim to know all the answers to the legal side of things. It's always good to have somebody on speed dial who can help walk through those. However, again, we're self-regulating in a lot of ways, and to the extent that you can do things within the letter of the law and kind of play in the gray areas, this is an opportunity as well that you're familiar with.
This morning and for this one, you were using pain points. What does that actually mean? Is that something that's going to keep them from coming out? Or?
Great question. So the question that was asked this morning and in this presentation, I used the phrase pain points. And I'm sorry that I didn't explain that well. It's more so like a customer frustration. If you as a customer of electronics, of clothing, of vacations, something that really bothers you about the industry is you can't try it on and return it. You have an electronic at home and you can't figure out how to set it up. You go on a vacation, but you have no recourse if you have a bad customer experience. Like, these are pain points that if they rise up big enough, if there's something like that in your pocket of Indiana, then that could be an opportunity for you to directly address it. I see that people are frustrated with this, either in the wine community or in our smaller local community. We are going to provide them with the solution by giving them an outlet on Friday nights after work because there's nothing else around. We're going to have a comprehensive event schedule because people just want to get out and socialize, but they have no means or forum to do that where we live. These are the kind of smaller, or they could be bigger pain points that you could address. Great question. Yep.
So it's really tempting to say that our target customer, our target audience is everyone.
Right.
How might that be disadvantageous?
Great question. So the question was, it's really easy to say that the target audience is everyone. How would that be, or could that be disadvantageous? So everyone 21 or older could be an audience member, but you know realistically that that's a shotgun approach. Now, you could spread yourself too thin. If you're really trying to go after everyone, you could start to look at your marketing and spend a lot of dollars against it that are going to have no impact. And when you have no impact, you'll get frustrated with the process and give it up completely. So before starting big, start small. Start small with understanding your local community, what that target audience looks like, what they like, how you could solve their pain points, and then market to that. Tell stories to that. As you have success there, boost it. In social terms, you boost a social post that's doing well. In regular marketing terms, if you've got a story that's working with the local community, boost it to the next suburb, boost it to the next region. Have it follow your pattern of state-to-state distribution, retail, and shipping. Whatever the case may be, start smaller. You'll be less disappointed than if you have a shotgun approach. Great question. I hope that answered it, yeah. Okay. Yep.
On the website, Tippy Creek, I think it was,
Yeah.
that has, you have to be 21.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you put that on your website?
Great question. So the question was an age gate, like we saw in Tippy Creek. How do you put that on the website? And, I'm not a developer myself. I know how it works. If you have somebody, whether it's yourself, a son or a daughter, a web designer by trade, whoever's managing your website, they have the tools that they need to add a page. So I'll use this term. A website is made up of a number of different pages. An age gate is a page that stands on top of every single other page in your site. So if you try and go in by any means, even other than the home page, that age gate will always be there. It'll drop a cookie on your browser, and that cookie will mean that every other page that you go to, you don't get prompted with the age gate. A webmaster will be able to do that. If you use Squarespace, there's a plugin. If you use WordPress, there's a plugin. It's literally installing the plugin, checking to make sure that the age is correct, and whatever verbiage you want to have about your brand, and it's done. It's that straightforward.
Okay.
It's a great question. Sure.
Explain to me again why you think we need to have an age gate.
It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. The question is why I believe you need an age gate. Two things. The associations, regionally, state, and nationally, all suggest that an age gate is a best practice for wineries, distilleries, and craft breweries. That's one. That's self-regulated. It's suggested, not mandated. And why would you imagine that they would suggest it's a best practice? It's because the associations that protect and promote us don't want any more government intervention in our business. And so that's one step that they feel they could recommend to wineries, meaderies, cideries like yours that would help them to continue to protect you without the government intervention.
Which associations are you referring to?
Well, even the local wine grape association for Indiana probably would recommend this. I'm imagining, but Wine Institute, the Brewers Association for the beer industry, the Spirits Association for distilled spirits, they all suggest it as a best practice.
But not that many people are doing it, at least in Indiana.
Well, yeah, 2 out of 80. Yeah.
Maybe the feeling here is that why should we do it to ourselves? That's succumbing to the same pressure that the government puts on us.
Well, I can see the arguments either way, but what I'm suggesting is that today's consumer doesn't mind. Today's consumer wants to know that you're responsibly marketing your product, and with that comes an assumption that you're going to do whatever you can to only market to adults of legal purchase age. And so if it doesn't harm your relationship with your customer, then why not do it? It's not succumbing to government pressure or trying to get ahead of it. It's more so doing whatever we can to, I know I said it, but regulate ourselves before somebody else does. I can see it. I'm glad you did. I can see either way. Yeah. Jennifer, yep. Oh, sorry.
Being something you would want to have if you only sold things that required you to be 21 or not. If you sell things that aren't required, then like all sorts of supplies, accessories, food, do you want an age gate? Or is that just deterring some customers?
Also a great question. The question was if you sell other items besides just those that require 21 or older. It's the same thing that a restaurant faces. Now, restaurants don't have to have 21 or older. They probably sell alcohol. They probably have the liquor license, but it has to do with the percentage of their customers ordering the other items besides alcohol. And I've heard 70% is kind of the cutoff. If 70% of your audience is purchasing alcohol or 21 or older, that's when you need to really take the measure to self-regulate and put the age gate up. If you're selling 50% of your e-commerce sales or tasting room sales or merchandise and cheese, then you might make the decision not to. But if a majority, 70% or more of your sales have to do with alcohol, then the best practice is to put an age gate there.
What if you have age verification later on in the process?
Like at the store.
Like at the store. Right.
And then just put it at the top.
So we have it there, right, we need it at the top as well.
It's more of just like a kind of a signage. Responsibility and good faith.
It couldn't have been better said. So the gentleman in the back said it's a show of good faith in a lot of cases, and that's absolutely the case. Thank you for that. It's honestly something we didn't talk about, but no, there was one winery, I can't remember exactly which one, I apologize, that had a corporate responsibility statement on their website. And a corporate responsibility statement is a giveaway. It's, we encourage you to drink responsibly. That's a corporate responsibility statement. You'd be surprised that 79 wineries didn't have anywhere on their sites that we encourage you to drink responsibly. To me, that's even worse than not having an age gate, because you put it in your footer along with the email address and the telephone number. It's a throwaway. Everybody could do that, but nobody does. So, a show of good faith, an easy one, an easy win. Sorry, Jennifer, yeah.
One quick question on the age gate thing, and then another question. The age gate, does it have to be a month, day, and a year? Or could it just be a yes, no? Like, are you over 21, yes, no?
Yeah, so yes, it can be yes, no. It could be month, year.
Put in their entire date of birth. I can see people having an issue with that, but I didn't know if a still stage gate would still be okay to just say, are you over 21? Yes, no.
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, that technically checks the box.
Okay, and then as far as the marketing and the promotional packaging, is it recommended that it all be similar, consistent coloring, branding, or does it have to be that way across the board? And we recommend, like, the takeout bags and the bottles and the advertisements all have some kind of key piece or color that goes across the board.
It's an awesome question. And the question that was asked was, I'll paraphrase, sorry, but it's color consistency, imagery, logo work. Should it be consistent across everything? Labels, experience at the tasting room, bags for gifts, things like this. The answer is no, doesn't have to be. Labels especially, because what you're looking for in labels, what we would suggest is some element of consistency that shows that you're part of a family. Now, if you change the color palette because it's a different tier of product, or if you change the color palette because it's a different seasonal or some other aspect of that, that's fine, so long as there are key elements that tie them all together. Now, as far as whether or not you choose to make them all the same color with different imagery, illustration, or otherwise on the actual label itself, I mean, having a consistent color palette, that goes miles towards saying that, you know what, we're owning this color palette. And then all of a sudden you see it reflected in the accent colors in the tasting room, and then your website reflects that same color palette. I'm not saying it has to be completely all pink all the time, whatever the case may be, but if you want to own pink, and if you want to be known for this color palette, then lean into it. It can only benefit you. As many touch points as possible. Good question. Barb, you had another one? Or?
Oh,
Okay.
Again, of course, anyone can type any date and year in there.
Right.
It's not really stopping underage traffic. But if you did, I'm assuming if you did type an answer to that question and someone says, no, I'm not 21, but there could still be content on this page that could be shown to somebody under 21, and you can code your pages so that those pages will show to them, correct?
It's a good question. Stick with us for just a couple minutes or we're almost done. So the question was, from an age gate perspective, you can always game the system, and that's true. You could always put in a fake date, and those people are going to be the same ones that are looking at TV, they're viewing commercials, they're subscribing to things that they shouldn't be. Like, people who are going to game the system are going to game the system. But you have put a good faith effort to deter them from doing so. So, again, that's why it's still a best practice. The question was whether or not you could actually code the pages such that, to your question before, if this person legitimately puts in an under 21 age, can you only reveal that content to them that they're eligible for? It's not recommended because, again, if a majority of your sales, tasting room, online or otherwise, have to do with alcohol, then it's your responsibility to do what you can to deter any underage person from seeing any of your content. Then you'd ask, well, Scott, well then why can we have families with kids at the wineries? Well, again, most of the people walking through your doors are paying adult of age drinkers. They may bring a dog, they may bring a kid, but a majority are of age. So no, it's not a recommended practice to only reveal the 5 pages that have dog bones and vests and whatnot. Christian.
Can you mine the data from the age gate? Can you figure out what kind of age group is looking at your pages and cater to them specifically?
Great question. So a majority of the people are going to be honest about their age, but it's never 100%. It's the path of least resistance. So I'm going to put in an age that I know is of age, which is 1/180. It's not my age, but you can mine that data. You'll have access to it. It's just not 100% accurate. I would suggest, if you were really looking for more insights into your customers, once you establish that relationship with them, send them an email survey. Give them a 20% discount where applicable or where allowed on an event, a tasting, a piece of merchandise. For answering a couple questions about themselves, they'll be 99% more honest with those answers than they would be with the age gate. Plus, you're going to get more insights into what actually makes them tick, in my opinion. Good question. Good? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to be around if you have any questions. Thank you for taking the time.